So good morning, everybody, and it's wonderful to have you all with us. We've been running this series of the energy of money roundtables for the past few months, and it's a big topic for us at DNA Behaviour. We're very close to finalising a major white paper on the whole subject of money energy, because money is such a huge force energetically in all of our lives. And what I've come to see over the past few years is how money and the stress of money impacts people's happiness and particularly their health. And a lot of the time, you know, our work at DNA Behaviour has been addressing money in some way in terms of behavior in the financial services industry, very rationally, you know, measuring people's behavioral biases, helping them build a financial plan, helping financial advisors have a conversation about money. But where we haven't gone is so much the emotional side of money. And I think that area needs to go a whole lot further. But also, what I found astounding over the last 20 years is the fact that business coaches and consultants don't really talk about money very much when they're helping, if at all, when they're helping clients make major decisions about their life, their business, their careers. And in some ways it's shied away from, but it's sitting there, and it's omnipresent if you want to think about it in terms of decision making. And this is true for leaders. And so what I wanted to do today was discuss, in the context of leadership, and you're all leaders in varying ways and different positions and experiences, how the energy of money affects the decisions that you make as leaders, or you know, for your teams, any way that you want to bring it up. But to address money, the energy of money in the leadership setting is our goal today. Not so much the financial planning setting, because that's already been covered in other roundtables that we've done, and is more known in that setting. But we are seeking to bring this whole subject of the energy of money to the attention of leaders, to business coaches and consultants, because it's so huge and it is actually affecting people's lives out there. And our message is that money is not only a financial issue, it's a health issue as well, because it's affecting people's personal energy in a major way. So that's where I'll stop for now, and we will get started with the first question that we've got. Leon, so do you want to put that up, or do you want to get everybody's going to do their introduction?
If we could just do a quick introduction.
I'm sorry, I'm so rational and to the point at times. That's why I need Leon. We need to get everybody introduced and what you want out of the call. So Leon, I'll let you get back to it.
Great. I'll do it sort of in the order we started, but Brian, if you don't mind doing a quick introduction, it'd be great.
Sure. My name is Brian Brogan. I'm a senior fellow and vice president at PNC Hawthorne Bank. I came to be drawn into working with Leon and Hugh with DNA Behaviour, I guess maybe close to 5 or 6 years ago. And I was in search for really risk metrics or psychometrics around behavior, around personality specifically. And it was really my belief that the work that Hugh and Leon participate in is really hits it on the head. It expands the personality style to really what happens when you're under stress, what happens to decision making around money. So I still find that extremely satisfying, and I'm still very curious about that topic, as I believe we're just in the early innings in discovering it.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. How about Monica?
Sure. Well, hello, my name is Monica Poole Knox, and I am Chief People Officer and also board director, working with DreamSmart Academy for several years, as well as Swedish Healthcare in the Pacific Northwest. I'm based in Seattle. I've been in the tech industry for many years, Microsoft, Twitter, CBS Interactive, Sony for a period of time, and a number of different tech companies. And I love this topic because I think that we don't talk about it. You said it well, Hugh, the emotional side of money. I think about my MBA courses. There wasn't a single conversation I recall us having about the emotional side of money. And I think that particularly in this day and age, what we're dealing with, there's so much uncertainty happening in our world right now. There's a lot of things that people are afraid of for good reason and some unnecessarily. I also think that, so you add money into the mix in this conversation we're having, potentially going into a recession, and you think about, underadvantaged communities. And, this is a really important topic to be talking about right now. So thanks for having me and thrilled to be here.
It's good to be here, have you here. Michelle.
Good morning, everyone. Michelle Feinstein. Thanks so much for inviting me to the conversation. So a little bit on my background, like Monica, I've been in the technology and financial services business for most of my career, spanning about 27 years. Spent some time at UBS Paine Webber, BNY Mellon Pershing, now Salesforce. For me, when I think about behavior and money, I think about my family. And so I think about my mom, I think about myself, and I think about my son, different generations. And this is what wealth firms and advisors are facing off to. In the example of my mom, she was a hard worker, but she didn't really do financial planning, didn't save appropriately. And so she ended up in a bit of a financial crisis. And thank God she had daughters, because we were able to jump in and help her. But what if she didn't? And it caused her a great deal of stress. For myself, I got to observe her working into her 80s and not really getting to enjoy a retirement. And so what we're starting to see is folks living a lot longer, right? Folks are living well past 80, maybe going into 100. And so there's this big need. And also I think a pressure on everyone, like, how am I going to make my money last? I barely could get it there when I was anticipating 80, but now 100. And then the last one I'll make is my son. So just watching, a new college grad, there's an assumption, I think, by wealth firms, well, we don't need to pay attention to them. They don't have any money. Well, let me tell you, college grads like my son and his friends, they're stepping out at 22 with six-figure salaries. They have some money. Now, how they behave with money is a little bit scary. So they need guidance.
Yeah.
That's brilliant, Michelle. We've been talking about the longevity side of this. So thank you. You hit the points. Great. How about Frank?
My name is Frank Corrado. Thank you all for allowing me to participate. I've gone through multiple careers myself. I started out in public accounting, where I got my CPA. Then I spent 20 years in a money center bank in New York, JP Morgan. And then I went on my own to start up a registered investment advisor and become a wealth manager, primarily because of the personal reason of trying to help people. And been doing this now for about 20 years, and I've probably gone through metamorphosis 3 or 4 times at least in how I apply the knowledge, starting from the technical side, obviously, which is always our strong points, moving into the last couple of years of getting coaching certification. I'm also a financial life, registered life planner in the Kinder Institute. So we've definitely taken our whole practice to the life planning side. And you basically cannot do life planning without addressing emotions. I was drawn to DNA behavior, much like Brian, because of the metrics and the behavior and the personality. But I think Elle says, and being on the ground, that the financial services industry has done a tremendous disservice to people by not addressing this topic with people. And I'm not even talking about, across all wealth stratas, anyone from, the beginning, people like Michelle's son to ultra high net worth people who basically are still having the same issues as anyone. So it really transcends wealth strata. So this is really was something that I want to integrate in the business as a real differentiating factor.
Great. Thank you, Frank. And it was, I remember our conversation a few years ago when you sort of had that same point. So it's great to be able to interact with you on this call. And then last but not least, our great Jeff Morris. co-founder or founder of Dream Smart Academy. It's great to have you here, Jeff. I know you'll have a lot to add to this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leon and Hugh, for the invitation today. Good to meet you, Frank and Brian and Michelle. And I've heard a lot about you. And then I know Monica, her and I go way back, from way back in the day. But briefly, the Dream Smart Academy was founded originally as a 501c3 that focused on financial literacy. And we taught underserved and marginalized communities the principles of financial wellness, except it was called financial literacy. And really quickly into our journey, we found that there was like 800 financial literacy programs in America at the time. This was 2009, 2010. So we really had to create this differentiator on what we were going to do, right? So we quickly interjected things like neuroscience, behavioral finance, and neurofinance. And we won an award for Financial Planning Magazine for some of the work we were doing because of the science that we were interjecting into the financial literacy space. Now, we're not financial planners, but we won this award in 2011. So we have like almost 12 years of history of not addressing what we call the mechanics of behavioral finance or financial literacy. We really have to dive into the dynamics. And Hugh's really honed in on this, like, what's your relationship with money? What role does your culture play? What role does your biology play? What role does your environment play? There's questions that we have to address that are dynamic, right? Rather than, mechanical. You can take any class on managing checkbook, save less, spend more. And in a week, if you don't change the person behind that seminar, you're not going to change. And we have years and histories of this. And the great thing about our partnership with DNA Behavior is we can objectively identify, right, a financial identity, which reveals their behavioral fingerprints or their financial fingerprints, which ultimately, reveals their money temperament. So we doing some really exciting training with groups like Wall Street Bound. I think we trained like 450 Black and brown professionals for careers on Wall Street, right? I think Hugh and Leon Morales have interviewed Troy Prince, but we are building a pipeline of people that look like me and Monica and Leon, right, to have careers on Wall Street. It is they don't get this training. I don't care what school they go to. So to take this conversation here domestically, right, in our corporations, in our families, but have this be a global conversation as well, is something I'm really excited about.
Thank you, Jeff. All right. I'm going to, Hugh, did you have anything else to share?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for their introductory comments, and for Michelle, the whole issue of financial longevity that you pointed out is a big theme in our upcoming white paper, because people, as you say, have got to have enough money to survive to 100, but also people are so stressed by money, it's actually, in some cases, it's killing them. And so it's a very interesting scenario. And I think if we help people with their relationship to money and get the energy right, they're going to live even longer, or more people are going to live even longer. So it's a very interesting situation that we're going into, and all of this has got to be funded. So it's interesting times. And I think, to the point Frank made, that perhaps part of the reason that this has not got more airtime in the financial services industry, even though it's starting to get more, even starting with George Kinder's work, is the fact that maybe advisors and life coaches and business coaches are scared of their own relationship to money. And until they get comfortable with that, the industry isn't going to develop, or the industries aren't going to develop. So, it's sort of, in a way, all of this starts at the top. It's leadership in its own right. So that's what we'll go down that track today, that for each of you as business leaders, so just think of this in the context of leaders running a business in some way, responsible for profit and loss metrics, performance metrics, however you think of it. Just the first question to discuss is, what does building an enhanced relationship to money mean to you in the context of leadership? So, Monica, why don't you start? There's no right or wrong answers for this, but I'll get you to just chime in with however you wish to respond to that question.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I was on mute. I started talking.
That's okay.
I realized that.
I know you're not shy.
I have not yet been accused of that. When I think about this question, it's hard for me to really divorce kind of my mind from being a people leader and having, had that role across many companies and seeing employees dealing with, or they're in a relationship with some of the financial resources that the company has provided. Like when I think about 401k benefits and to see who is jumping into those 401k benefits and who tends to linger back, even at senior levels. It's very interesting, and I think when I think about this question, we can definitely start with employees within our organization and not really make any assumptions, because I think there could be some assumptions that, well, if you're making a certain amount of money, then you have some level of financial literacy as well as a comfort level with things that you may not be comfortable with, because we all bring our own experiences to the table when we come to companies. Michelle talked about her mother and just the generation that she came from, and I think about my family in the same way, that they were very focused on saving, but the concept of investing was very foreign. It was just foreign to them. Now, I'm not saying that, it's been foreign for many years. Just for them, it was foreign to them, even though they were middle class. And particularly with women now being in the workplace and having their own income, years ago, that just wasn't something that women were doing like they are today. So what it means to me is not making assumptions about where employees are in their journey, their emotional journey with money, and really approaching kind of the benefits that we offer, 401ks, the employee stock purchase plan, very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Approaching this in a way that suggests that we need to really help people tap in to their emotional relationship with money, regardless of how much they're earning or how long they've been in the workplace, to really help them leverage and take advantage of what we offer. I know in some companies, there is an automatic enrollment to the 401k program, which I think is great, but it still doesn't really address what we've been talking about, which is the emotional relationship with money. So yeah, that's kind of where my head goes when asking this question.
No, well, that's a great response, and I appreciate that, Monica. I think that helps a lot, and it does bring up a very good point that the amount you earn bears no correlation to your financial literacy or your ability to deal with money. And I think we see a lot of that people can earn $500,000 a year and they can blow it all up, and then they're under even more pressure in the workplace to keep on earning it, and they put themselves into the wealth trap then, and it's a vicious cycle. So, it's a big issue that you're raising.
Hugh, I think the thing that jumps out to me when you say that are professional athletes, right? Exactly. How many athletes, it's a perfect example that we're all really familiar with, where we know athletes are maybe earning more money that they've ever earned, or someone ever earned in their family, and in 3 years they blow it for the points you've just raised. So yeah, I think that's spot on.
Well, unfortunately, also a lot of CEOs do it, and they've got very heavy lifestyles, and what pressure are they putting the company under so that they can continue to earn that income? Salespeople are big spenders. I'll see what everybody else says, but that can provide a lot of pressure as well back into the organization and their behavior. Michelle.
Yeah, so as everyone was responding, I was thinking about how I would respond to this. And I think, one of the things that comes to mind is when it comes to money and your personality and your personal situation, especially in the workplace, most folks are not going to want to be super transparent with their management, with their leadership, with someone in HR about their situation with their savings and debt. Example, as people move up in their careers, things in their life are going to change. They might be moving on from a first marriage to a second marriage, going through a divorce, and all of a sudden that divorce, really puts them in a financial situation that maybe they never anticipated. And so that job becomes ever more important to balance whatever commitment they agreed to as a result of getting divorced. That can be highly stressful, right? Same thing if, folks at that middle age take on, their parents and have them come live with them. There's all these unique situations that face us all, and it all points back to money, and it all points back to the need of the job. So while I think companies do a great job with the automatic enrollment for 401ks and, go ahead and participate more in the stock option plans or defer your bonus, I think where they lack is creating a safe space for employees to come and share and say, hey, this is my credit situation. This is my financial situation. You're a wealth firm, like, we need your help. Like, how can you help me personally better manage my personal financial management situation? So I think there's just a fear of doing that because employees don't want to be looked down upon. And when you think about, the other thing that came to my mind was just someone sitting through their annual performance review. There are a lot of firms out there right now that are being forced to do forced rankings and to put 10% of their staff in the below bucket. And that's to, kind of weed out people that have been with the firm a long time or underperformers. Again, that combination of that performance review, that conversation, how the manager's thinking about it and the person receiving it on the other end directly impacts their personality and what they can do with money and how they feel about money and how they feel about their job.
Yeah, I mean, that's hit a lot of chords for me, Michelle, that answer. And I'm glad you brought it up because I think the whole transparency issue is important. And if we want to help people, they've got to be in a safe place, psychologically safe to bring it up. I know.
And you could apply that to an advisor client situation too. Most of us want to look good to our advisors, look like we have it all together. So it's like, how transparent and honest are you going to be with that advisor, with your situation? I would hope most of us would be very transparent because that's why we're paying them the money, right? To help us.
That's what I found when I started my own wealth management business in Australia, that a lot of the clients didn't really want to fully share and they were scared to share, or they just made a in some cases they didn't know what to share, but a lot of the time they wouldn't. And that's why one of the reasons what motivated me to build Financial DNA, because I wanted to have a different starting point for the conversation to get them talking about themselves and their life, and the money would flow out. And, I wonder whether there's a way to change the coaching and performance evaluation conversation at a firm. I know when I worked at Arthur Andersen in the very first part of my career, some of the management knew that I had a very successful mother who's an entrepreneur in her own right. And they made decisions about me because of it. They actually told me, this guy over there needs the promotion quicker than you, Hugh, even though you've worked just as hard and just as well as him. Because because you can get it from your mother. Well, that's a big assumption,
right?
So this cuts both ways, and I wonder what an organization would do if they knew that an employee actually had debt and wasn't managing themselves properly in a financial services business. Would they put them in the lower end of that ranking? It's very interesting. This is the whole point. This is why we're having this conversation, Michelle. So I really appreciate you raising the point. Frank.
Excuse me. I think I probably would take it from the advisor client relationships, since that's what I do. And, the first comment about money and leadership, I think that what happens is as a leader, the one thing about money is you really can never tell if people have money. We all know that we think that people have a lot of money from how they present themselves and how they show themselves. And we know many situations where it's absolutely false and they have no money. And what they come out as having money. And you've all heard about the guy who's, lived like a pauper and left $12 million to the church, right? So the stories all over the place on this. So I don't think that, money really should be, part of that dynamic. I think leadership, by the other hand, is something that is truly seen. And leadership is transparent. It's based upon authenticity. It's based upon vulnerability. It's based upon all the leadership skills. It's hard to fake being a leader. Let's put it that way. So that's the concept there. I think as far as helping people, I've been working long enough to understand when companies were really patriarchs and matriarchs and they took care of their people. I mean, now we're lucky if we can get them pay a minimum wage, let alone, trying to make sure that their debt to income ratio is within bands, right? And so I think it really comes down to the individual taking some responsibility to be able to see whether they in fact have an issue. The problem is that unless they have a certain amount of money, there's no one to go to be able to help them in any kind of genuine way. Because, what you started in DNA behavior was just cracking the surface. What you're doing now is you're digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And basically what you're making it is very, very difficult. And I don't mean difficult in a negative way, but it's complicated to have these kinds of discussions with clients, right? This is not, planning 101. And, so I think the industry itself is not prepared to do this. I don't think the financial models allow it to happen. And I don't think the advisors are skilled enough to be able to handle these kinds of questions. And, it's not until the CFP exam of March of 22 that the first question on behavioral finance made it to the exam. And, that's like a couple months ago. I mean, we're still like years away from this being integral to what we do. And, so the stuff we're doing now is pretty groundbreaking, but it's also pretty complicated and difficult to do with clients. It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. Thank you, Frank. And it's good that, you provide a direct answer to it. It is hard all around, but we've got to try and find another way to
Absolutely.
make this
Right.
easier to have the taboo conversations, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
So, we're going to keep on working at it, but if we don't take this head on, it won't get addressed. Brian?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate all the different answers to this question. I think everybody's hitting parts of the nail on the head, if you will. And Frank just nailed it there as far as a lot of people just aren't trained to do this. But as we know with corporations, if you look at it, they move on a couple of things. They move because of litigation threat. They move because of pressure as far as a competition and being competitive in the marketplace. And corporations move because they're innovative and they're the first adopter, if you will. We see a lot of that disruption happening in the West Coast traditionally with tech companies. So we may look to them as maybe a leader in this space trying to address this issue. From my perspective, taking off, what Michelle had mentioned, the fear of money taboo is still rampant, as you had mentioned also, Hugh. The topic is very taboo, and that's why we can't address it, because the people that would be assigned to address it aren't skilled in handling it themselves. They haven't gone through the process of what I call kind of financial psychoanalysis, because that's really what it needs to be, not at a major level, but at a surface level, at a 101 level. To be a practitioner or to handle this type of information, you had to have that kind of psychology or social science background, in my opinion. And so that's one. There's a great paper called Money Taboos. It's a white paper that talked about this years ago, that psychologists, PhDs, could not address this in the therapeutic setting because they themselves were embarrassed of how they handled their own money.
Yeah.
And I mean, if that doesn't tell you, full stop, that's one of the main issues. But if we took a kind of an industrial organizational psychology or organizational behavioral management perspective, which is proper, you can look at HR departments, which have really moved into kind of this adversarial position against employees. And I hate to say that, but that's kind of my opinion. And so maybe in this quest of financial wellness, we may want to address it in the sense of maybe splitting or breaking off a portion of the HR, or maybe it's not HR at all. It's part of the the wellness, financial wellness part of a company, to address these challenges, because HR I say adversarial because they're aligned with the company. They're not necessarily aligned with the pure altruistic benefit of the employee, if you will. And so one way you can do this, so the financial literacy, the financial education, the financial personality can all be done at that level, kind of like what Monica had mentioned about, the 401k. Now, don't knock that, because the 401k is the first big win that behavioral finance rang the bell with, which was to get people to be nudged and automatically enrolled into the 401k, 403b, or 457s. So that is a huge win that we just need momentum to build upon. So yes, it should be mandated, actually, in my opinion, and I'm not a big regulation guy, but it should be ERISA mandated, because it's such a good nudge to have people automatically, because we know if you don't touch your 401k in the first 90 days, as far as enrollment, 3 years go by on average, and you lose that opportunity cost. So we can build on that. We can say that you have to go through a financial wellness class in order, as far as onboarding for employees. There's a lot you can do. We see companies, B Corps, sustainability. Green is human financial wellness. I see that as being green. If your employees have financial wellness, that's being green in human terms. So I think as a leader, you may want to mandate this. You may want to create a moat around what you're doing, because one of the main objects or really challenges for behavioral finance, when you drop that independent thinker, contrarian thinker into an organization, guess what happens? They succumb to the negative pressure of the culture, and they can't make a change because there's not enough of them, and they don't have enough momentum and or backing. So startup companies, Wealthfront, Betterment, these companies come out of the gate with wellness, so it might be better for them to have this kind of philosophy versus kind of the old dogs, turning the Titanic, if you will.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I think there's a lot of perspectives in there. I think one of them that's interesting is the whole idea of HR having to toe the line of the corporate policies because of what HR does, and whether there's an opportunity to have more of a split off division inside the company that's more around people culture, addressing financial wellness separately. Because I think also that gets to Michelle's point, there's got to be a safe place where these conversations can happen, where maybe not everything is on the record as well, and going back into company files and things like that on the employee. So, there's a lot of parts to this. Jeff, would you like to?
Real quick on that, Hugh, is I totally agree. That whole thing about what I call humanizing. People only feel comfortable if they understand the language, and there's a lot of jargon in our business. They feel comfortable. There's trust and rapport, and the person on the other side, whether that's HR or whomever is facilitating, the conversation is them too are vulnerable, transparent, and really showing their human side. So I think that's a big part of really stepping into this new paradigm, if you will.
Yeah. Jeff, would you like to add to this?
Sure. I wrote down for myself that this is a wellness issue, right, for HR. Like, it should be up front. Like, if there's many studies that show that if an employee is financially well, right, they will be more productive. They'll be more productive at work, at home, be less absenteeism, less presenteeism, and all those things. And I made a note to myself that says one of HR's number one stressors, Monica, you can verify this over the years, is that not only employees do start a 401k, but when they get in trouble financially, where do they go to get money from? The 401k. So it's like a give and a take. They get, they leave, they lose, they win, they lose, they win. So sometimes they don't ever get ahead of the curve because they keep taking money out of this. And if they can't get it from the 401k, they go to alternative loan products, right? Predatory loan products. We've heard about that. So one of HR's number one stressors is around the issue of taking money from the 401k to meet a financial need, an unexpected need. And then I also wrote the issue of, we know how we can improve EQ, right? We talk about development of EQ. We talk about behavioral intelligence, BQ, but we should also begin to shape the conversation around FQ, financial intelligence, and take those quadrants for developing emotional intelligence and also begin to develop financial sound practices, like what's your level of financial self-awareness, right? What's your self-management tools do you use, right? And then what's your social awareness tool? What does culture do? What does biology do? And then how do you collectively manage it? How do you manage it socially with a team? Like your board? Like, how do you manage it as a CFO? How do you take into account your own financial self-awareness practices and make sure that that's not being a detriment to the team? So it's just, Leon, that you're familiar with this quadratic process that we could also implement with our financial training as well as we do BQ and EQ.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jeff. I think that it's interesting that a number of you have jumped on the wellness path here. What about, and Michelle, I was going to ask you this question because you're in Salesforce, which I think's the number one sales organization out there. I mean, it is a selling business. It's a selling machine. How do you see, if you can answer it, how do you see the the salespeople, the executives in there handling their relationship to money, in terms of the sales incentives that they get, and the drive to make a sale? And I know this question wasn't on the list here, but I just thought it would be good to bring up this side of it as well.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. So I have the perspective, number one, my husband was a salesperson at Salesforce prior to me joining. So I had a front row seat to the pressure that an account executive can feel with the engine that Salesforce is, right? They are a sales-driven organization. All these account executives are compensated based on the business they close in a given month, in a given quarter, in a given year. And there's a lot of pressure. I think what we're starting to see, though, is that might have been the more immature model for Salesforce, but they're starting to shift the model that, there's an importance on value-based selling, transformational sales, and deepening relationships with these clients. And so as long as that account executive is able to lay out a plan that, even though this has a long sales cycle, they're doing the right things, they're connecting with the right people, a little bit of that pressure is starting to shift. What they're also doing is partnering with other account executives across the enterprise, because now for Salesforce, it's become very much more of a platform or ecosystem sell as opposed to a point solution. And that's great because that means they can win as a team. And at Salesforce, they've had some really big wins in the past year because they approached it that way. Being new to Salesforce myself, there are lots of things that they're doing that we talked about today, right? The automatic enrollment of the 401, the option to buy more Salesforce stock. But another version of money is time. And they do a wonderful job of giving people a lot of flexibility with their time so that they can, have that mental wellness and that mental well-being. And that's really, really important.
Yeah, that's very good. I like the last part as well, because it's going to make happier executives there.
There's a survey where they said, hey, would you rather be paid more or have the option of having more time in your life? And people chose time. More of the folks chose time.
Right.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Because as our white paper will bring out, happiness is a big factor here. But it's also interesting how the organization has matured over its, last 25 years since it started or thereabouts to this more platform sales, collaborative sales approach, as opposed to everyone out there, hunting as hard as they can. It's what built it. But it's interesting how it's reshaped. It's taken that long to reshape itself, in fact.
They've been doing a lot of listening to clients, and a lot of the clients are saying, prove to me, show me the value of my investment within Salesforce. And also, how are you going to help me accelerate my own strategic goals and objectives across many different pillars?
And I think it's an interesting perspective to bring into financial services organization, where there are a lot of individuals selling as opposed to the organization selling as well. So it's interesting to see how that model will transcend other groups. So let's just do the second question, and I know we'll run out of time with this, but how do you see your energy as a leader being impacted by money? So Monica, would you like to kick us off on that? Is Monica gone on mute?
I think Monica may have to leave. Leon.
Okay.
Yeah, she
All right.
she maybe had to leave a little earlier than she thought.
Okay. So Jeff, given you've got the mic, why don't you answer that?
Sure. Again, happiness and joy all come from having a balanced emotional EQ, right? Behavioral EQ and a financial balance as well. Like when your life's out of kilter financially, energy's drained. But when you feel like there's at least some hope for a future, there's at least some light at the end of the tunnel, you're more willing to work toward that. So energy, your relationship with money definitely impacts your energy to get up out of the bed in the morning, right? Definitely impacts whether you want to go to work or not, or whether you're successful at work or not, whether you have a successful at home work, at home life as well. So money impacts energy significantly, my friend.
Yeah, it's interesting in some of the research that we've done, around this word hope that you just used, that one of the biggest negatives in terms of the energy of money is people not having a budget. And I think Michelle was referring to this, and it's come up in various ways today. People not having a budget is actually what's causing the stress. So, in a way, the budget is the life-saving tool. A lot of people don't want to do budgets or be restrained by it. But it's what, in a way, is killing them, and it's ruining their happiness and their health by not having the budget. Because what the budget does, at least, shows you the pathway of what you've got to do and provides hope for the future of what can be achieved if you follow the steps. Right. So it's interesting for that.
So
Frank,
Hugh, before you go on really quickly, the work that we do can also be, as far as budgeting goes, your financial identity or your temperament is going to go a long way to if you are going to budget.
Yes,
so
that's right.
Our job as the educators are going to be able to know how we can encourage, right, a budget. Whether you're a reflective thinker, you're going to do it differently than the community builder. You're going to do it differently than the adapter. So our job is to really customize this approach to how we budget.
It's absolutely, there are people there who will naturally do budgets. In fact, they'll take it too far. And
that would be me.
They'll keep on working and not give themselves the time off that Michelle's talking about. Then there are others that are more, spend freely, and we got to talk about this as a spending plan. And
could I jump in on that real quick, Hugh? Because I was just a visual came into my mind, and I think when you say budget, some folks will get scared and say, "Oh my God, a budget! I don't want to sit down with a spreadsheet and have to think through everything." But it could be as simple as 5 mason jars in your kitchen with little labels on them that say, trip, college, groceries, emergency savings, and just putting money in it as a starting point. Another example that I thought was pretty interesting is, what sites like Acorns have done. Like, okay, maybe you're strapped and you have a lot of bills, but you still have to put you first. So take your loose change and let Acorns, invest it for you. And even, $5 turns into 20, turns into 100. And then before you know it, you have something. So I think we have to help the community kind of get over this stigma that budgeting is hard and that there are lots of easy ways to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think thank you, Michelle. I think part of it, I want to change the conversation about budgets and why it's important, and for people to realize that it is a happiness and health issue as much as it's a financial issue. And I think it's again comes down to how do we approach the conversation with people around it, in starting small. And I think it's about habits, isn't it?
It is. And, something else that came to mind is I think people's behavior with money starts to change, obviously, when it gets personal. So for myself, I'll tell another story. So my mom had breast cancer. She died this past year. And then I decided I wanted to do something. And so I'm getting involved with this breast cancer walk at the end of the summer. And the obligation is you form a team and every team member has to earn $750 minimum. So I started reaching out to people and I started to get excited about this ability to earn for this charity, especially because it's for my mom, but that broader cause. Now we're close to almost $8,000 and I'm even more motivated. I'm like, I just want to keep seeing how much we can earn and like leverage. So it's a different interaction with money, but it's very powerful as opposed to the normal financial planning or paying your bills or paying off debt. It's, getting people to think, have you gotten involved with a charity? Like, how are you giving back when it comes to money as well?
Yeah, because what you're bringing up there is that there's purpose, there's passion with this.
Yeah.
It's sort of very fundamental to the core of your life now, that issue. And Jeff and I are doing something in a different area. We were both, and Leon, we were all boys without fathers. My father died when I was 1, so we've set up a charity actually for that issue.
Love that.
Yeah, and it's a huge issue out there in society. We didn't realize how big it was. And
the other interesting slant I'll give you, kind of a different angle, is maybe asking, whether it be the employee or the person that you're doing financial planning for, what do you feel guilty about? Where's your guilt? Is it about how much you shop? Is it about how much you travel? But then you face that off to what makes you happy. So for example, every year I love going on big vacations and bringing my kids, and I have 5 kids. Most people think that that's a financial planning disaster. Like, why would you commit to that every year? I mean, we're taking them to Europe and Montana and all these places. But to me, it is one of the most important things that I fund every year, because to me, it's so meaningful, right? For the connection, for the memories, for the family. So I think this, the situation of what are you guilty about, but what's meaningful to you, worth funding, and that starts to align to goals. It all comes back to this relationship with money, and why do you spend where you spend?
Yeah, you can't feel guilty about that, can you?
Hugh, if I could just jump in on what Michelle is
Yeah,
saying.
please. I was going to get you up next, Brian. So go for it.
Just the behavioral finance research actually confirms that the Mason jar, if you have your kids' pictures on the jar, you're actually double. Not only do they participate in a consistent fashion, but the amounts that they put towards it is almost double.
Couldn't those pictures make you a little angry too? Like, oh, Devin keeps asking me for money.
You haven't met my kids. Yeah, it makes me really angry. No, I'm just kidding. No, but that personalization is a huge part of it. And that's part of what they call the empathy gap. And the empathy gap is really basically being able to see your future self. And that has to do with what? It has to do with delayed gratification or self-denial. You have to denying yourself as a form of self-love. Self-love is the highest form of care and wellness. But if you do it in the empathy gap, you're caring about your future self 2 times more than you're caring about your present moment, which is a big, big thing. And people need to be coached around that. We're not all born, for 110% of loving ourselves. Trust me, I know. So that personalization, that empathy gap is a big, big part. And to your point about budgets, I'm just going to propose this. We need to take the TNT stick and blow up the word budget and just start using different language. Language is a big part of the new movement of behavioral finance. What is triggering people? What is comforting people? And using language that is not I always call it jargon or vernacular that is too confusing or doesn't make them feel in an appropriate fashion is about creating the environment of comfort. So spending plan is what we all want to be on, right? I want to be on a spending plan. Tell me how much I get to spend. And that really goes to empowering your choice of allocation. As you were mentioning before, you're not robbing the person, you're giving them power to choose where do they place their most attention, because that will grow. What you place your focus on grows. And you get to prioritize, so they get to understand what is important to them. Even before the inflation, food was a big portion of our budget or for spending plan, as I said. And guess what? That's great. I love food. And we were foodies before foodies even came out, so that's okay. You find out what's really important, and you can just look at your spending plan every month and see, what's the heartbeat. So after 90 days, you get a real big heartbeat of where your spending is. And then after 12 months, you get to see the full cycles. The old adage, don't make a commitment until you see them in four seasons. It's kind of the same way with your spending behavior. You need to see 4 seasons of your spending.
But I think it's interesting that you bring that up, Brian, and say, let's blow up the word budget. And I think that's a good point. And there's another word that could be blown up too, and that's the word goals. Because a lot of people don't respond to goals, but we talk about goals-based planning. What are your goals? I could see, and I'll just use Michelle as an example, sitting down with the executives in Salesforce and saying, what are your goals for the year? And what's the budget going to be for your area or division? And depending on the person, it could be a complete turnoff, and they might run away from that. And, it's interesting whether, we've talked, this has sort of come up a little bit in a financial planning, wealth management setting, but from a leadership perspective, is budget the right word for discussing the numbers and performance? Is goals the right word in performance reviews? Is there a different word that can be used, particularly depending on who the person is? So,
and you can add on to that retirement. I was in a meeting last week where I actually, said to the clients, I hate the word retirement, and they confirmed they hated it too, because it's demoralizing and demeaning for somebody who's built a company over 40 years to say, I'm going to retire now. Excuse me, who are you? And no, retirement should be, what do you want to do in the next phase? What do you want to do in this new chapter? How are we going to paint this canvas?
yeah.
That empathy gap is about painting a picture. Let's paint this picture together. What colors do you want to use? What kind of backdrop? Kind of like a Bob Ross moment, if you will.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Brian. I want to get Frank. I haven't forgotten you. So, what would you like to say about this question?
A couple things. I mean, I think I've learned that I've come to the conclusion over the last 5 to 7 years is that, my role as an advisor is not necessarily to change people, but to change the way people think about things. And so, because to be able to change people is really, really difficult. We talked about, people having problems with budgeting and I don't even use the word saving anymore. I just call it deferred spending, which it makes it a lot more amenable to people. But the point is you got to put people into the framework to be able to do this because they really want to do it. Good example is as I started to go into this, you call it goal setting or blow up the word goals. I mean, again, it depends upon what you call it. You can call it priorities, you can call it whatever you want, but there needs to be goalposts, right? Because without goalposts, then there's nothing we do that could give us any kind of end game, right? It's just it's ludicrous. So when we start to talk about what those goalposts are, and generally when you get to the tough questions, like Kinder says, if you go to the doctor and you have 24 hours to live, what are your regrets? That's a powerful question to get people to really think about what's important in their lives. And so when you do that, then it makes all the other things a lot easier. I mean, we've always had time having difficulty with clients addressing their estate plan and, guardians for their children and some of the basic, what we call financial literacy things they have to do. And they would never do it. They would never want to face their mortality. They never want to face those issues. They're always procrastinating until you point out to them that the children are the most important part of their priorities of their life. And this is the reason why you're doing it. And then they do it. I mean, they do it if they know why they're doing it. They're not doing it because you're telling them to do it or because some book tells them to do it or because these are the most important things that, these are 5 fundamental. I mean, every time I get a request from a publication, to give some information, what are the 10 top tips? What are the 5 top this? What are the 2 top? I mean, it drives me crazy because there's no answer to that because it's so personal to the individual that one person's top 5 is someone else's bottom 5. So, I think the point here is, in dealing with people, again, across all spectrums, you have to be able to get, as Brian suggests, that that empathy gap has to be decreased. You have to become vulnerable. You have to get involved with them in their lives. You have to draw them out to find out what is the most important things. And then you have to be able to not only just find that out and put it on a piece of paper, then you got to go get it. And sometimes what they're asking is not financial. It's not about financial. It could be about relationships. It could be about their careers. It could be a lot of different things, right? And so, we've done a lot of goal setting, traditional goal setting. Everyone's got a questionnaire, fill this out, check the box. Until after 5 or 6 years, the client says, I really wish I could have done that. And I said, how come you never told me? And he said, well, it wasn't on the list. And, and I didn't know, I didn't know I could say that. And so, giving clients the permission to make changes in their lives is most important. And that, again, as I said before, the authenticity and the vulnerability of advisors or anyone in a leadership role is the most critical thing to giving people the opportunity to be able to make changes in their lives.
Well, I think it's a very good point, and Frank, it goes back to something Michelle said at the start. If a leader is going to be authentic, which they must be, and open and transparent, they're very key traits of leadership. But that's what's going to create the platform inside the organization for psychological safety. And if we're going to get people to, and that's true of an advisor working with their client, if we're going to get that place of psychological safety for people to share, we need to do some of this. And leaders need to get comfortable with themselves about where they're at with money, whether they're pressured or not is important, because if they are, that's going to permeate through the organization. The same with an advisor. If they're under pressure in some way personally, it will permeate through how they deal with a client. But we've got to get people from the top down to be more vulnerable and transparent, so that we can create this place of psychological safety. Organizationally, how does it happen? Maybe it's not going to happen in the HR arm of a business, but there could be a wellness division, because the research is out there. It shows very clearly that more employees want that kind of balance in how they're managed inside the organization. And organizations have got to be, I think they've got to be financially rewired to make that happen. Re-architected or restructured. And just to provide some other feedback, we did this call with a very different group of leaders about a month ago, and the conversation was very, very corporate around bonus schemes, the behavior of executives chasing down budgets, meeting goals, where the leadership invested the money. Did they invest enough in training, for example? So where did the company budget go? So you guys have provided a very different, which is great, which makes a very rich conversation, a very different perspective on the energy of money inside the organization. So this is very helpful for us in putting some of this out there in the future and incorporating it into the white paper. As we wrap up, and I know we're close to the 12 o'clock, does anybody else would like to make any final closing comments?
Nothing for me, Hugh. This was great conversation. Thank you. I look forward to seeing the white paper.
Yeah, we'll get the white paper to you. We'll also send you the notes of the conversation of what's said, and we'll keep in touch. So if there's nothing else to
Hugh, I would
Yeah.
just add just one thing that Frank said that was huge, which is giving clients permission. Time and time again, just happened to me 3 days ago. When you lower your guard and you're vulnerable and you're transparent for the other person, you give them permission to do the same.
Yeah.
It is something, it's what I call being human, humanizing the whole the approach and the process. And I teach at St. Joe's University, and I'm here to tell you, it's not the technical quantitative skills that are going to be in heavy demand just around the corner. It's going to be the human skills, how to treat people as humans and recognize the such, because the new generation actually identifies themselves as not humanoid, but like human technoid, because, and that's really what we're going to have to address going forward. So stay tuned. We'll maybe talk about that later.
Yeah, and I think it's a very important point of leadership, and advisors are leaders, executives are leaders, is leaders go first. And that's the key, one of the key points there. So anyway, everybody's got to go, and we appreciate you spending time with us today. We'll get you the notes, the conversation, and the white paper shortly. So thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing all of you soon. Enjoy the summer. Enjoy your family vacation, Michelle.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.